We're going to be talking about wealth killers or those things that you needed to avoid in life if you actually want to be a millionaire or a billionaire in your family. There's nothing stopping you, even though you are the last born or the second born or the third born or the fourth born in your family, that there's nothing actually stopping you from actually becoming very wealthy or very rich. You see, you need to understand wealth equation at a very tender age if you don't want to be poor in life or you want to be successful in life. You see, becoming wealthy is very simple, and becoming wealthy is very easy. Unlike what people always tell me that becoming wealthy is very difficult, very cumbersome, very hard. It is not as hard as people make you to understand. You see, there are very powerful basic principles that you need to follow if you actually want to make it in this life. So I will be talking about the biggest wealth killers that we need to avoid in our early 20s. You see, life is an equation, and once you get the equation right, there's every possibility you're going to be rich. Now, I'm going to be talking about some certain basic principles or things that you need to understand that in your early 20s, these things are very imperative, and they'll go a long way to help you in building wealth and securing your future, and also having what I call financial independence. Now, the first basic principle is that you need to have what I call a job, or you need to work. You see, the first principle or the first step or what you actually need that will actually serve as a foundational role or serve as a building block to securing a wealthy future for yourself, a future with what I call financial independence, is that you need to get a job. You need to get something doing. Then when you get this job, you are actually paid money at the end of the month, or you are actually paid for the services you have actually rendered to the company you are actually working, or for the individual or group of people you are actually working for. So the basic thing you need to know, understand in the wealth equation is that you need a job, and when you have this job, you are actually paid money. Now you need to go to the second one in the sense that when you actually pay this money at the end of the month, what do you actually do with your money? Do you spend the money immediately? Do you divide your money into three parts: spending, savings, and investment? Or you simply go out there and refuse to get it right by spending your money on those what I call dumb stuffs or things that will not add any value to your life. So when you get the money, what do you do with your money? Now, as an individual that actually wants to become successful in life, that actually wanted to become wealthy in life, to be rich in life, to be superfluous in life, to be well to do in life, you need to understand that once you get paid at the end of the month, you need to split your money into three parts: one for spending, one for investment, and one for saving. Now, that money you actually splitted, one should be meant for investment, and what we're saying here is that you must use that money to buy what I call asset. So once you get paid at the end of the month, you must use part of that money to buy what I call an asset. Now, when you buy the asset, your asset will actually bring you wealth. And when you have wealth, what happens? You have what we call financial independence or financial freedom. Number one, you must get a job, and when you get a job and you get paid at the end of the month, you use part of that money to buy asset. And when you buy that asset is going to bring you wealth, and when you have wealth, you have financial freedom. And you see, it's actually an equation. But on the other hand, most of the youth or nowadays, those in their early 20s, early 30s, and the rest of them, once they get that money, they always stop on the second equation. You get a job, the job gets you money, and when you get the money, you use the money to buy what I call liabilities or dump, stuffs or things that cannot actually add value to your life. And at the end of the day, you discover that in most cases, most of these youths are unable to achieve anything at the end of the day. Because nothing stops you that if you start investing your money early in life, at the age of, for example, 25, and you are able to invest for 20 years, I can guarantee you, if you are very consistent with that money, if you are very consistent with that investment, if you are actually diversifying your investment portfolio, you can be rest assured that in the next 20 years, when you are 45 years, you can confidently, retire yourself, and you will not do anything again. Just retire and start enjoying your money, because at the end of 20 years, that money will have compounded so much for you that you might not even be able to handle the wealth that you're going to have after 20 years when you're 45 years. Now, assuming you are actually, investing 1 million every year for the next 20 years, that means that in the next 20 years, you are going to have what I call 43 million naira. This actually means that in the next 20 years, you are going to have like 43 million naira at the end of 20 years. Now, imagine you actually retire with 43 million naira after 20 years, and you're now 45 years. And you can actually pay yourself what I call salary at the end of the month from that money. That means that after 20 years and you have 43 million, that money is going to get you 8.6 million every financial year after you're 45 years old. You can actually, in this present economic situation or circumstances, you can actually live with 8.6 million naira per annum. So you can split that 8.6 million naira per annum into 12, and you begin to pay yourself salaries at the end of the day. So you can actually retire at the age of 45 years comfortably, because even at that 45 years, you are still very, very active, in terms of your strength and power and the rest of them. But now you have actually been able to go through what I call a decade of sacrifice, and because you have actually been able to go through this decade of sacrifice, you can now retire now and enjoy your money. So what we're saying there is that those things that you are unable to get yourself during the period of investment, you can now afford them comfortably for yourself now. So in Nigeria today, you can live with 9 million naira per annum. That is, you split the money into 12. That 9 million naira, you can split it into a situation where you are going to be earning like maybe 600,000 naira or 700,000 naira. You are going to be paying yourself 600, or let's assume 500,000 naira per month, for the next 12 months. That means if you're actually paying yourself 500,000 naira times 12, that means that you're going to be spending about 6 million naira in a year. So 8.6 million, that means you're still left with 2.6 million, which you can actually reinvest into some other things at the end of the day. So if imagine you're actually earning 500,000 naira now, you are retiring at the age of 45 years with 500,000 naira, you can live a very good life with 500,000 naira. That means that in this situation or circumstance, you don't need to be very extravagant in your spending. You don't need to be wasteful in your spending. You don't need to buy things that I call dumb stuff that will not add any value to your life. So it is very, very easy. Now I'm going to quickly go through some things that you needed to avoid in your early life if you actually want to be rich. That is, what are those things you needed to avoid? Because these things are actually wealth killers. These things are actually things that made it very impossible for most of our youth to actually become very wealthy in life. These are things that actually drain their pocket, create a hole in your pocket, and actually make you to broke all the time. But I can assure you that if you actually avoid these things which I'm going to talk about now, you can be rest assured that you are going to be rich or wealthy at the end of the day. Number one of those things that are actually wealth killers is what I call cars. Cars. Now, somebody will say cars. What do we mean by cars? Of course, cars, automobiles. You see, automobiles actually create a lot of holes in our pockets. You see, I can remember when I started my journey, when I got married at that time, I had 2 cars in my compound. I was buying cars. I started with a Bluebird, then I bought a Nissan, Altima, then I bought a Nissan Quest, then I bought a Celica, then I bought some other cars like that. It got to a point I was using 2 cars in my compound. I could go out with any cars I actually wanted, and it got to a point I thought I was living large. I thought I was living like a big boy. I thought I had it all because I had 2 cars. I can use any one I wanted, most especially my sports car, very nice, wine color kind of car. It was a sport car then. I had this car, and that car could, could speed like a thunder, like a thunder, like lightning, like the speed of light. That was the kind of car I was in that selling at that time. But it wasn't adding any value to me because I had to be maintaining them. They were not easy to maintain. I had to buy fuel them, at that time. I have to buy fuel, I have to fuel, I have to maintain them, I have to do some other things like that. So it was creating holes in my pocket. So you can imagine you have in this situation, or in present economic situation, where you have people that have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 cars, doing what with those cars? Buying cars in Nigeria now, because of the high level of inflation in this country now, is very, very expensive. Buying a car now is very, very expensive. And apart from the fact that you buying this car, you are still going to maintain that car, and you are going to fuel the car. Presently now, fuel in this part of our world is about 920 naira. In the past administration, it was about 286 naira or thereabout. But now, buying fuel now has tripled over 300 to 400% increase in the price of fuel. So fuel is very expensive in Nigeria now, and maintaining a car is also very expensive in Nigeria now. I could remember some time ago I went to for my pension, stuff like that, and I met a group of some young guys. In the course of talking to them, we dive into investment, and it got to a point these guys actually surrounded me, and they started asking me questions on how they can actually invest their money. And one lady asked me that she was getting a lot of pressures from her friends who are actually telling her to buy cars, that she can't be working in this kind of an organization and you don't have a car. And I asked her, how much is your money? If you actually buy the car now, what do you think you are going to use the car? And I asked her, she told me frankly that they have a staff boss in their company. And I said, since you have a staff boss, then you don't need a car. You can actually enter that staff boss and save a lot of money for yourself, and also invest a lot of money for yourself as well. At the end of the day, after the discussion, I asked her, do you still want to buy a car? And she said no. So in most times we are living in a society, a society where you have a lot of peer pressures, and what I call materialistic society, where friends will push you, they'll pressure you to do those things because they want you to give an impression that you're actually rich, that you're well-to-do, that you're actually buoyant financially, and the rest of them. But deep down, you don't have any financial backbone, because apart from the fact that people are buying these cars, a lot of people are buying cars on credit. They buy cars on credit, and they pay a lot of interest on those cars. Apart from that, people also buy expensive cars. They buy very exorbitant expensive cars that they cannot even afford. They cannot even be able to afford or maintain at the end of the day. And you saw that after about 6 or 7 months or thereabouts, those cars are packed down. They cannot even use those cars again. So that's a bad liability. I'm not saying you should not buy cars. I'm not saying you should not use a car. I have a car as well. But what I'm saying there is that you can buy economical cars that are on low fuel consumptions, cars that are very cheap, not very expensive cars that you can easily afford, cars that the fuel consumptions is not always very, very high. You can buy those cars. So you don't necessarily need to buy cars that are very expensive, that will drain a lot of money from your pocket at the end of the day, in terms of maintenance, in terms of fueling, and some other things like that. So that is the number one wealth killers. Then another thing which you need to avoid if you want to be very rich in life at a very tender age is that you need to avoid what I call a wristwatch. You see, I watched a video some days back when one of these celebrities was doing a birthday, and somebody actually gave him a wristwatch worth about 2 billion naira. 2 billion naira. And I actually streamed. How can somebody be using a wristwatch of 2 billion naira? Or naira in terms of Nigerian conversion from dollar. And I asked myself, what do you want to use this kind of a wristwatch? At the end of the day, it's called that wristwatch might actually be stolen at the end of the day. It might be stolen, it might be lost. And apart from that wristwatch might not have value. As well as telling me that, okay, if you want to sell the watch in the future, you can actually sell it at a very exorbitant price. Of course, it is possible. But instead of banking your money on wristwatch, which value cannot be guaranteed in the future, why don't you invest your money where your money can actually work for you, can actually grow for you, and can actually create more value for you at the end of the day? So I will not subscribe, or I will not say you should not buy wristwatch. What I'm saying there is that you can buy economical watch. You are not flying to the moon, or you are not going to the space, or I don't really understand why you have to buy those expensive wristwatch simply because you want to show off, simply because you want to give an impression that you're actually rich. If you buy a watch of maybe 5, 10,000, 15,000 naira, I don't think that is a bad idea, or 20,000 naira is not actually a bad idea. After all, the watch is only to keep time for you. So why buying an expensive wristwatch that at the end of the day it might got stolen, or you might lose it at the end of the day? Because even at the end of the day, that wristwatch can also lose its value. Do you get it now? So buying wristwatch can actually create a hole in your pocket, and buying wristwatch is also a wealth killer. Then the third wealth killer, which most people are not really aware of, like when I was talking to those ladies on that day, she mentioned what I call a vacation, going on expensive vacation. You see, a lot of people, of course, it's good to work and it's also good to relax. But why relax? Why don't you relax in the comfort of your home? And if you want to even relax, why don't you go within your country or within your state? Must you travel out? A lot of people travel out to Bahamas, to so many countries, California. To so many countries like United States, France, Belgium, Amsterdam. Holland, Germany, and the rest of them, all in the name of what? Of vacation. That are trying to rest. Now, if you really understand what I'm saying here, you know that going on vacation is very, very expensive nowadays. And most people, whenever they are going on this vacation, such vacations are always sponsored by credit cards. A lot of people are living from one credit card to another, credit card debts from one credit card debts to another. They are actually going on vacation, but that money is not being that money that they're actually going to spend on in vacation is not actually their money. It's a money on credit card that they are going to pay back in form of interest to the company where they have gotten the credit card. So getting a credit card can actually, is very, very good. But on the other hand too, when it doesn't have any value to your life, or create any value, or create more money for you, then it becomes a liability. So going on the vacation is good, but you need to cut down on your vacation. A lot of people, I've seen people that actually go on vacation, they spend like 5 million naira on vacation. Even traveling out now is very expensive. For example, if you want to travel out to US now, you spend about 8 to 10 million naira. Now you have to pay money for the hotel you are going to lodge in. You have to pay for this, you have to pay for that. At the end of the day, you spend roughly 18-20 million naira just on the vacation of 1 week or 2 weeks. God Almighty, may God open our eyes and understanding. That money which you're going to spend on vacation can buy a very good future for you. Imagine now you put 20 million naira into an investment portfolio now. In the next 20 years, that 20 million naira, you would not even imagine. That money would have gotten you up to maybe 80 million naira. 80 million naira in the next 20 years. You can imagine that. Just keep that money there and go and sleep. In the next 20 years, that 20 million can get you up to 80 million naira at the end of the day. Imagine if you are actually retiring on 80 million naira in the next 20 years. What do you think is going to happen? That 80 million naira will guarantee you 16 million naira interest per annum. 16 point something million naira interest per annum at the end of the day. You can live with 16 million naira in a year. That means at the end of the day, you are going to be paying yourself 1 million or 1.5 million naira as a salary at the end of the day. So those things that you're unable to get yourself, you can actually get them after 20 years, after going through the decade of financial sacrifice. Then another wealth killer that's actually creating holes in the pocket of many people today now is what I call designer clothes. I know of a company called LVMH, Louis Vuitton, Moet and the NSA, owned by the man called Bernard Arnault. This man owns Louis Vuitton. This man owns Moet and Chandon. This man owns NSC, NSC VS and VSOP and the rest of them. They produce designer clothes like Fendi, like Louis Vuitton, like Dior and the rest of them. They are all fashion trends. Now, these clothes are very, very expensive. These, spirits are very, very expensive. These cognacs are very expensive. They are very expensive. Buying Louis Vuitton now, which is designer bag or a shirt or a t-shirt, is very, very expensive now. So you can imagine how far people can actually go in buying designer clothes. Some time ago I saw someone wearing a clothes, and when I actually went on the internet to know the price of that designer clothes, I discovered that that clothes alone, that jeans shirt, was about 15 million naira, and I screamed. You can imagine how far people can go simply because they want to look trendy, they want to look fashionista, they want to give an impression that they're actually rich. But on the other end, this money could have been used to buy investment portfolios that in the next 10 years these monies are going to compound. So I'm not saying you should not buy clothes, but you can buy the ones that are less expensive, the ones that are economical, the one that you can easily maintain, the one that you can easily change. Nobody arrests you if you don't buy designer clothes. Nobody will imprison you if you don't buy designer clothes. Nobody will, challenge you if you don't buy designer clothes. If you don't buy Champion, if you don't buy Adidas, if you don't buy Nike, if you don't buy Fendi, Dior, Louis Vuitton, and the rest of them, and Champion and the rest of them. If you don't buy Versace, Gucci, and all those designer clothes and fashionista products, if you don't buy them, nobody's going to buy. It's going to bite you. Even if you don't have the money to buy them, you can go for those ones that are fairly used. They are there in the market and they are very, very cheap. You can wear those things and nobody's going to bother you at the end of the day. The other thing that's actually creating holes, or that is actually a wealth killer to those in the early 20s, is what I call bad family planning. Bad family planning. Now, how does family planning has to do with a wealth killer? You see, as a youth, you need to plan your future very, very well. You see, if you don't plan at that early inception of your life, there's every possibility that you might regret for the rest of your life. Now, what I'm trying to say here is that, having a bad family planning is a very, very dangerous thing for a youth or someone that's just starting his life with his couple, with his wife, or with the husband. Now, what I'm saying there is that as a young couple, you need to do what I call, you need to know that raising a child now is very, very expensive. You buy Pampers now. Buying the Pampers now is very expensive. Buying the baby food now is very expensive. Giving birth now is even very expensive. Something happened last month in which a couple, the guy actually lost his wife because they were unable to afford 500,000 naira where the wife was taken to give birth to a baby. And by the time they actually went to another place to help the wife to deliver the baby, they lost that baby, they lost the wife as well. You can imagine 500,000 naira, they could not raise it. So giving birth now is very, very expensive. Hospital will charge you. Apart from that, you're going to buy baby food, you're going to buy Pampers, you're going to pay for the medical bills when the child is sick or anything. Now, you can raise those child, you can have children, but you need to limit the number of children you have. I spoke to my wife some time ago because there was one of these guys I don't usually see in the area again, and he said he has gone out to go and look for something else. He's actually an educated guy, but he ended up riding Okada as a business, and he couldn't pay him because he has a very large family. I asked my wife, how many children does he have? She said 7 children. 7 children in this present economic circumstance or economic inflationary trend is a suicide mission. Having 7 children. So why don't you space those children? Having 7 children is a suicide mission. And the guy could not cope because the economy is what is biting hard now. So you need to do what I call effective family planning, or you need to space your children, or you need to limit the number of children they are going to have at the end of the day, because keeping children now or having children now is also very, very expensive. Then another thing is that if you want to actually marry, this is very important. You don't need to marry someone that will not support you. We are now in an economy where only the man cannot be working. You might not be able to survive it, because at the end of the day, it's called that people that actually die very early now, or die at a very tender age, or like one of my friends was telling me that he lost one of his family member. The guy came back from work, and he said he has a headache, and from there they gave him food. They said, "Oh guy, relax," and he slept off, and he didn't wake up again. And I asked him, the first question I asked him is, how How old is the guy? He said he's 37 years old. You can imagine someone that is 37 years old sleeping and not waking up again. And I asked him, how many wives does he have? He said 2 wives. And I said, how many children? He said 8 children. That's a suicide mission. You know, at the age of 37 years, you have 8 children, 2 wives. And I asked him, what kind of work is he doing? He said he drives from Lagos to Ilorin, from Lagos to Kwara, you know, interstate kind of business. He wasn't giving himself rest. He wasn't resting because he wanted to make money for the family, to sustain the large family which he has been able to raise by himself, intentionally, deliberately, you know. So it's a suicide mission. So you need to have a partner that will support you, not a liability. So if you go marry now, you need to marry somebody that will support you, not someone that will just be a liability, eating your food and getting fatter and fatter at the end of the day, not adding a value. So in this present economic situation in Nigeria now, you need to have a partner that should be working and both of you should be supporting each other. That is how it actually works at the end of the day. The 6 wealth killer which I'm going to talk about is what I call homes and houses. Homes and houses. Now, you see, it's very good to have your own personal house. I can remember some time ago when I started building my house, you know, the journey wasn't very easy like that, but I survived it. I was able to finish the house, and that's where I'm actually living now. But it wasn't very, very easy, and that was then in 2019. Now we are in 2025. You know, I actually wanted to, you know, get some blocks to do 1 or 2 things in my compound, and I asked my bricklayer or the person I used to buy that used to help me in building those blocks, and I asked him how much is a bag of cement now, and he said a bag of cement is 10,200 naira. I could remember in 2019 I bought that bag of cement for 1,685 naira. Now it's 10,200, from 1,685 naira to 10,200 naira now. So if you want to build at least a 3-bedroom flat now in Nigeria, it is going to cost you between 8 to 10 million naira to build a 3-bedroom flat in Nigeria now. And when I say building a 3-bedroom flat, that means that house is not going to be a luxurious house. Just so that you know, get blocks, do some things, and you know what I'm talking about there. So building house now on the average level, you don't want to spend money. You want to be managerial. You want to, you know, manage your money. It will take you 8 to 10 million naira to build that kind of a house in Nigeria now. Then imagine how much they're actually selling a piece of land now. In my area there in Ifo, it was probably, you know, sometime ago someone wanted to sell the land, and they contacted me, and I asked him how much you want to sell the land. He said 2.5 million. That was about 2-3 years ago, and he couldn't get a buyer. And somebody came, you know, and we spoke together. He said no, he has increased the money from 2.5 to 3.5 million naira. And I said, well, and the person said, I'm sorry, I can't get that kind of money. And somebody came later on again this year, and he brought 2.8 million naira, you know, cash, raw cash, 2.8 million. I said, give me this land for 2.8 million naira and I'll buy it instead of 3.5 million naira. And the man said, no. And he said, how much is the last price? He said, 4.5 million. So you can imagine from 2 point something million to 4 point something million now. The price of land has actually increased in value. So what you bought it last year is not going to be the same thing you're going to buy it this year. The price is going to increase. Now, how does it affect, or how does it relate as being a wealth killer? You see, most people, when they want to rent houses, they want to give an impression that they are actually rich, they are actually well-to-do, that they are actually wealthy, and they'll go and get houses or rent houses they cannot afford. You know, some even went to the point of what? Of borrowing loan from the bank, of borrowing money from the bank to rent a house that is not even their own. And you ask them, how much are you paying every year for that house? Some are paying 1 million, some are paying 1.5, some are paying 2 million, 2.5, 3.5. Even in VIA, they are paying about 24 million per annum for what? For a 2-bedroom flat. And when you are the 2-bedroom flat, just a mushroom house that is not too big like that, just, you know, 24 million naira per annum just to rent a house that is not even your own. So you can imagine that. So a lot of people put themselves in circumstances that is beyond their financial ability. So instead of renting that house, very exorbitantly. Why don't you get something that is, manageable, something that you can easily manage? I can remember in 2019, when I was getting closer to my the completion of my house, I actually went and lived in Ikorodu, and I lived in Ikorodu for about 1 to some years, 1.5 or 2 years in Ikorodu before I actually packed to my own house. And what did I do? Where I was living in Abilene, I was paying a lot of money for house rent, and I was paying, it was draining my pockets. I'll pay a lot of money for my house rent, I'll pay a lot of money for my children's school fees, and that area in Abilene at that time was an exorbitant area. It was a flashy area. It was an area that is on a high cost of living side. Do you get it now? So I find it very difficult to actually save money and do a lot of things. But later on, I left that area and I went to Ikorodu, and I was able to gather a lot of money together, and I was able to finish that house. So it is not every time you have to live in areas that are very, very expensive. Sometimes you might not be able to accomplish those things which you actually wanted for yourself at the end of the day. So why don't you go for something that you can easily afford, something that you can easily buy, something that you can easily pay for. So you can actually rent houses that you can easily pay for. It is not compulsory that you have to get a 2-bedroom flat, a 3-bedroom flat, a 4-bedroom flat, a bungalow or a duplex. It is not compulsory. You understand? A lot of people are getting all these big houses, and most of the rooms are actually empty. Nobody is actually living in it. Then number 7 wealth killer, which is last one, that is actually creating a lot of hope and can be a wealth killer in the early stage of your life, is what I call a debt repayment. A lot of people are living in the tsunami of debt, from one credit card to another credit card, from one loan to another loan. I'm not saying it's not good to get a loan or to get a loan facility, but if you don't have anything you are going to do with that loan money, it is better for you not to collect that loan. In Nigeria now, if you are collecting a loan from any financial institution, most especially banks, you are going to pay 38% interest rate. 38% interest rate. Then if you calculate it, if you have 12% of that 38, that makes it 50%. That means that you are going to pay almost half of that money you have collected as a loan. So imagine you are collecting 2 million naira as a loan, and you are going to pay in 1 year. That means at the end of the day, you might be paying almost 3 million in as interest for the loan you are actually collecting for 2 million naira. So you can imagine that is on the high side. 38% on interest on loans from banks. It's a suicide mission. Then, as if that is not enough, if you are getting a loan from all these loan sharks, all these loan shark companies, those mortgage financial institutions, you are going to be paying 4% per month. Now, calculate 4% per month. Some are even collecting about 5% per month times 12. That means you are going to pay 60% of that money in 1 year. That's a suicide mission. If you are paying 4% of that money per month and you are paying for 1 year, that means you are going to pay 48% of that money for 1 year. That's a suicide mission. So, and you have some people that are living outside today that are living from this kind of a life. So you are making other people to be rich. You are creating wealth for other people. You are making other people to be very, very rich. And you are becoming more poorer and poorer and poorer at the end of the day. So imagine year 1, you are living in debt. Year 2, you are living in debt. Year 3, you are living in debt. Year 4, you are living in debt. Year 5, year 6. Before you know, you are getting old already. So you are living from one debt to another, from one tsunami of debt to another tsunami of debt. So 2025, if you actually want to become rich and wealthy, you need to avoid all these things I've actually stated. I'm not saying you should not get a loan, but if you're going to get a loan, it must be for a productive reasons. Now, somebody will say, but rich people also get a loan. Now, look at that word, rich people. Rich people also get a loan. But it's not that most people that actually go for these loans are actually investors or entrepreneurs that use this money for business purposes. So don't borrow a loan to pay for house rent. Don't borrow a loan to pay for liabilities. Don't borrow a loan to buy flashy things, because at the end of the day, you are going to pay a lot of money. Now, before I round up, there are some 3 things I'll quickly state that if you want to be the first millionaire in your house, in your family, there are some certain 3 things that you need to do. Now, I'll quickly go through them. Now, number 1 is that if your friends actually invite you to nightclubs, to go and do hangouts, drink beers to stupor and enjoy yourself, buy beer in a coffin where you pay millions of naira and the rest of them. You don't need to go. You don't need to go with them to go to nightclubs and buy all those things and waste your money, your hard-earned money. What do? You should use that money to invest, save that money or invest that money. That's number one. So if your friends are actually asking you to go with them to a nightclub to have fun and cash fun and spend money recklessly, flamboyantly, extravagantly, you don't need to go with them. So use that money which you are going to use to get those things, to enjoy yourself. Use that money to invest in your future for the future, so that when the future comes, you can actually live a very good financial independent life. Now, another thing which you need to avoid if you want to become the first millionaire in your family is that you need to limit your monthly subscriptions on internet services, Netflix and the rest of them, GoTV, DSTV and the rest of them. Some people today now, some people are not even watching TVs again in Nigeria. They spend all their hard-earned money on their internet services. They buy datas. I know someone that buys datas of 50,000 naira every month on data, just to go on YouTube to watch videos of somebody dancing, to go on Instagram. I'm not saying you should not buy data. If you're going to buy data, it should be for commercial or business purpose, something that can create more value and create more money in your pocket. But if it's for strictly entertainment, I don't think it makes sense wasting money 50,000 naira buying data every month. You are making other people to be very rich at the end of the day, and you are making yourself to be very poor. At the end of the day, those people are going to have all the benefit of what life can actually offer them. But don't forget that if you don't put this money in the right channel, that money might not be there forever. So you need to tie the money down by putting the money to operation and making the money work for you. Because money is actually a spirit. If you don't use that money very, very well, it will go to somebody else that will use that money very, very well. And you begin to blame the sun, the moon, and everything for your predicament, for your financial, fall and your financial income, shortcomings, that somebody is against you. Nobody is actually against you. You are taking the wrong financial decision in most cases. Now, number 3 things you need to do if you want to become the first millionaire in your house or your family is that when you are actually tempted to buy designer clothes, buy Gucci, Fendi, Louis Vuitton, buy NSC, cognac and all those drinks that are very expensive. You don't need to buy all those things that are very expensive. Instead, invest your money where your money is actually going to do for you. So when you want to buy those designer clothes to show off or give an impression that you're actually rich, you don't need to do that. Use that money to secure your future. Use that money to buy your future. Use that money to secure a very prosperous, well-organized, financially independent future for yourself and your generation of children that are yet unborn, where you are going to create what I call generational wealth. A word is enough for the wise. If you actually follow this pattern and you're in the early 20s or in the early 30s, this video is actually for you. And I want you to actually, go through this video again and try and judge those things I've actually mentioned. And if you can put them into practice, you score that in the next few years, you are going to be a millionaire or a billionaire. So becoming wealthy is not hard, it's not difficult. It's just that it has some principles and equations that when you put them into practice, you can actually get to that place which you have always dreamed of achieving at the end of the day. So while other people are busy, buying designer clothes, buying expensive wristwatch, buying expensive phones and the rest of them, buying data to watch entertainment on YouTube, on all those things and the rest of them, you don't need to do all those things. You don't need to look flashy. Just start building the future. Start building wealth. And wealth actually, work like something that you actually plant. It's like you actually plant a seed, and that seed will begin you begin to nurture the seed, and it begins to grow to get to a point that little seed that you actually planted will become something big in the future.